In this action-packed episode, suspension, driveline, wiring, safety jumpsuit. Let's go. In our last episode, we started the reassembly process by tackling a bunch of jobs that moved us one step closer to hearing this V8 beast roar. Now it's important to keep that focus, turn up the hustle, and make some more great progress. Let's get to work. Months ago, you saw me break down the stock Miata drivetrain into smaller, more manageable bits. I did this so we could harvest and freshen up the parts that we would reuse. Today we're going to work on the front and rear suspension control arms. While this is a low-mileage car that's had a pretty good life, the stock rubber suspension bushings are 11 years old and aren't up to the task of reining in our newfound performance. The first step in replacing the bushings is to press out the old ones. There are tools made for this job that work well, but I like the old pipe and all-thread technique just as well. What you're left with is a nice, clean home for our new bushings. But before we do that, we've got some more work to do. First, let's start with a good cleaning. Once everything dried, what we had was ugly surface rust and lots of it. This rust is superficial and very common even on the cleanest cars, but it would be a crime to bolt that back onto the car. To fix this, I picked up a can of POR15 Rust Preventative paint. This stuff is legendary for bringing old rusty parts back to life and sealing them up for good, so it was the perfect paint for the job. Following the advice from a variety of online tutorials, I also grabbed some paintbrushes and plenty of protective gear, as it was unanimous that if you get POR15 on your skin, it may be on you for good. I started the process by prepping all of the control arms. This involved using wire brushes and Scotch-Brite pads to remove any rust or loose flakes of paint. This is yet another example of the magic of video, as I spent many hours on this step alone. With that all done, it's time to suit up and paint. To keep any spills or other mess in check, I laid down some plastic and had plenty of cleaning supplies on hand. Also, this stuff dries quickly, so work fast and seal up any unused paint between coats. The coating goes on easy and is thinner than you'd expect, so there's no need to lay it on thick. So here's a look at the control arms after their POR15 treatment. I'd never used this before and I'm really impressed with how it all turned out. The POR15 instructions suggest using a top coat for maximum protection, so I grabbed my favorite paint, Summit Racing's General Chassis Enamel, and went to work. Here's a look at the end result. Now that's more like it. Alright, there's one more important step to our control arm restoration, and that is to install new bushings all around. I didn't want soft OEM replacement bushings, and I didn't want rock-hard polyurethane bushings. So I chose these gummi loggers from Flyin Miata. What? Gummy loggers. Isn't that what everyone calls them? They're just like the factory bushings, but use rubber that is around 30 to 40% stiffer. Rubber mounts are an excellent maintenance-free choice for street cars as they retain great feel while at the same time reducing deflection versus the stock bushings. Alright, let's install them. Installation is very similar to how we removed the stock bushings, but this time around I sprayed them down with water to allow them to slide into place. When installing rubber bushings, you want to avoid solvents and other lubes for a variety of reasons. There we go. Now just repeat this process 20-some times and you're done. A big pile of V8 horsepower isn't much fun if you can't rein it in around the turns. To handle this important job, I chose the V-Maxx Extreme Track Pack coilovers from Flyin Miata. They're a popular, proven combination that are often used on Flyin Miata's own turnkey V8 Miata builds. Included in the kit is everything you see here, you just need to add your stock upper shock mounts. They're fully adjustable and include this unique secondary spring, which adds more useful suspension travel versus a traditional single coil spring. Coilovers will give us complete control over ride height and corner weighting, and these knobs allow us to adjust damping to our liking. The kit also includes great instructions with a variety of setup details to help get you ready for the road. Since we need these stock upper shock mounts, our first step is to pull those off of our stock Mazda Speed suspension. To do this, we'll use a spring compressor and some basic tools. Now that we have those off, we'll remove the compressor tool. We've got some other jobs to do before we can bolt on our new coilovers, so let's get on those. First, we're going to bolt up our newly restored rear control arms. I did my best to label everything and keep the hardware organized, but a quick look at the service manual is helpful. I used a little anti-seize on these through bolts to keep them from getting stuck in case we need to remove them someday. I'm just snugking these bolts for now. They'll be torqued to spec later when we have the full weight of the car resting on the suspension. Y'all know that pairing a big torquey engine and heavy-duty transmission with some wimpy driveline components is like skipping leg day at the gym, bro. We've already handled the first part of our upgraded driveline when we picked up this Getrag 342 limited slip differential and V8 Roadsters install kit that adapts it to our stock Miata rear subframe. To round out the driveline upgrades, I chose the V8 Roadsters Stage 2 driveline kit. The kit includes these strong 32 spline axles with high output inner and outer CVs rated at 550 foot-pounds of torque. The kit also includes new billet high horsepower hubs and ARP long wheel studs. If your car has ABS brakes, V8 Roadsters will make sure the axles include these rings to make sure everything works as it should. Also included in the Stage 2 driveline kit is a new heavy-duty 3-inch drive shaft. A steel version comes standard. I, however, opted for the lighter aluminum version because it's awesome. V8 Roadsters offers all sorts of driveline options depending on your uses and needs, so be sure to visit their website for more detailed info. Alright, enough gawking, let's get to it. First up are the new hubs. Here's one with the new ARP studs installed compared to our stock hubs. Next, it was time to install them into our uprights. To do this job right, I picked up a set of Mazda rear wheel bearings and pressed them in. After that, the new hubs can be pressed in too. Alright, I think we're good to go. Here's how they turned out. Now the axles can be slid into the differential. They are specific to each side of the car, so be sure to take note of that. With those in, I installed the new drive shaft using the included hardware. Next, I took a little break from driveline work to finish plumbing the brake and fuel lines. There's a good spot here along the frame rail to run both, so I installed some more rivet nuts and secured both lines with their own cushion clamps. After securing those, I made sure the gas tank fittings were tight and then moved on to installing the AN fitting adapter onto the engine's fuel rail. We'll connect the fuel system for good once we sort out some wire routing up near the engine later on. So here's our complete installed driveline. Now that we're all connected, it's a great time to add fluids. Starting with the differential, I called up Summit Racing and ordered up the recommended AC Delco synthetic axle lubricant and limited slip additive. This magic elixir offers superior oxidation and thermal stability, long fluid life, and a new grape scent. Wait, what? Alright, hold up. I'll be the judge of this. Alright, let's test out this new grape scent. Put this here. It's not bad actually. Still plenty of differential oil smell in there. But you do get this wisp of grapey scent. Yeah, it's in there. That's not bad. Now it's time to fill our diff with a couple jugs of grapey goodness. Now let's do the same with the transmission. Just a little tip, I like to clean out an old gallon jug and attach a pump for bigger fluid fill jobs like this. No, I didn't use SuperTech brand fluid in this transmission. That was for my minivan, which gets only the finest and most cheapest fluids that Walmart offers. With that full, we tighten the fill plug and move on to the next job. Now it's time to tackle a job that most every car guy dreads: wiring. Wiring is always a big, important, and complicated job when doing an engine conversion like this. But once again, Chevrolet Performance swoops in to give you a much-needed hand. This is the Chevrolet Performance LS3 525 engine controller kit. It's a comprehensive, standalone setup that includes the complete wiring harness with all of the correct connectors labeled and ready to plug into our LS3. It also includes an engine controller calibrated for our LS3 525, oxygen sensors and mounting bosses, a mass airflow meter and mounting boss, the drive-by-wire throttle pedal, excellent instructions, and a 1-year warranty. The kit's purpose is to allow quicker and easier installation of the LS engine into whatever vehicle you can imagine. Yes, you can source junkyard engine harnesses, ECUs, and gas pedal assemblies and more, but this kit is all new, wonderfully simple, and ready to run. It's a huge time saver. We're going to make a few modifications to adapt it to our Miata, but in most every case, all that's needed to get a vehicle running with this kit are power and ground sources, a good fuel pump, and an electric cooling fan. As with all the Chevrolet Performance kits I've used so far, I was really impressed with this setup. Everything is OEM quality, down to the extra heat protection over the high temp loom where wiring will run near the exhaust. Stuffing a V8 into a Miata leaves little room for wiring, so to keep everything protected for the long haul, I called up Summit Racing and ordered up a host of heat control products in a variety of types and sizes. You'll see me using these in many places under the hood and under the car from here on out. Next, I filled a couple organizer trays with high-quality heat shrink wire connectors, an assortment of Summit Racing's cushion clamps, and other accessories that will allow us to do the job right. I also picked up any additional wiring pigtails I needed, like one for our starter, air conditioning compressor, and transmission backup lights and reverse lockout. Alright, let's get started. First off, I gotta give a huge shout out to Flyin Miata for creating their excellent wiring manual for LS engine conversions. It's free of charge and can be downloaded from their website at flyinmiata.com. Their wiring manual, in addition to the engine conversion manual, were incredibly helpful and essential to getting this job done right. I also referenced the stock Miata wiring diagrams and the Chevrolet Performance engine harness wiring diagram when needed. My first job was to find a home for the engine controller. This looks good. Next, it was time to lay out the wiring harness and begin to get a feel of where everything goes. In case you're wondering, the towel on the engine is to protect the plastic intake from getting scratched up. Alright folks, this is me in the thick of the process here. Reworking some of the GM wiring. Some of the lengths are a little longer than they need to be, or sensors come out in a place to where you just want to relocate it a little bit to make it work better in the Miata. But I know I like to show you every step of the process, and all over the past episodes I've been doing so. But when it comes to wiring, I just can't do it. I've tried to video and wire and set it up and think about it, but I gotta be honest, I really have to concentrate on this part. So with that said, here are the highlights. I can't really say how many hours in this is, but even though it looks like total mayhem, good progress is being made. I kept reference pictures nearby to help me understand wire routing and other tips. Thank goodness for the internet. I worked slowly and deliberately and did my best to think about how the factory would do this, like reusing this Mazda firewall grommet for wires that go into the cabin. So what I'm doing here is there's a couple wires that need to be hooked to the Dakota speedometer box. And what I'm doing is just running those along with the GM loom because, rather than run another little set of wires and loom that's going to run somewhere else, just include it in this master engine harness that runs into the cabin, and it's just a little cleaner that way. And plus, it gives me something to do. As I made more progress, I found a home for the engine controller's fuse box and mounted that down for good. Also joining the party will be this Innovate digital wideband air-fuel ratio gauge kit that I picked up from Summit Racing. You've seen me use this gauge in my Turbo Talent and my Grand National, and it'll make a great companion to our V8 Miata too. I like this setup because it's well made, easy to install, and is a proven performer. The gauge itself is good looking and comes with a couple choices of faces and bezels. My favorite feature is the ability to incorporate one of the analog outputs into a data logger, which I'll be doing later on. Next, I bolted down the ECU for good. Plugging all of the harness clips into the sensors was simple, but this crank sensor was a little tough to get at. Although I couldn't see it, a quick picture with the phone made it easy to find. Aha! Next, we needed to connect a thick ground strap from the engine to the chassis. Yes, one could connect a bare ground strap in a minute or two, but one would risk chafing nearby delicate wires and hoses years down the road. A little protection and heat shrink tubing turns this jagged ground strap from a liability to an asset. For all of the electrical connections, I used the highest quality heat shrink crimp connectors I could find and a good crimping tool to do the job. These connectors provide a super tight and waterproof connection. My goal here is to never have wiring even cross my mind in the future. I just want to jump in, turn the key, and drive for many years to come. Now it's time to make a thick power wire to run from our nearby alternator to the engine controller's fuse box. And there we go. I tell you, I spent many hours just figuring out the proper wire routing in an effort to keep them away from hot parts, moving parts, pinch points, and so on. Here I lucked out and found an unused bolt hole that I chased and used to mount a cushion clamp. Also, as part of the wiring job, I simplified the Miata's chassis harness. I just removed some of the items that we definitely won't have a use for, like all of the plugs for the little solenoids and such that used to be in this area. Ah, much better. We're getting near the end of our wiring work in the engine bay, which means we can move to the interior. I started work in there by reinstalling our HVAC components that we removed months ago. Oh man, I am so glad to be done with all that wiring. Oh boy, so much more to do. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Summit Racing for helping to make this video series possible. If you enjoy these videos, please let them know on Facebook or Twitter. I would really appreciate that. Thank you also to V8 Roadsters and the folks at Flyin Miata for their great products and fast technical help. This is a complex project, and it's great to know that you've got experts ready to help you along. In the next action-filled episode, we keep pushing ahead toward our goal of hearing this beast run. For more pictures and details on this build, check out my website at v8mazda.com. So with that said, thanks again folks. We'll see you next time.